Good morning, everybody. I'm Rani, the managing director of Ignite Tel Aviv. Don't know how many of you heard about Ignite, what we do here, but we start and end with the same phrase. We are currently opening the deal flow for batch number 6. So any founder running here a meaningful technology company in multi-vertical areas, you are more than welcome to touch base with Maya. The batch will start of May. In general words, first of all, welcome everybody, founders, Ran from Entrée and the team, welcoming you probably the first time you're here at Ignite Tel Aviv, open for business. I'm still shocked from how many people arrived physically here. Intel Ignite, in brief, is an accelerator by Intel focusing on product market fit acceleration, touching with companies post-seed, more than $1 million, and our appreciation to the IP, supporting these companies in every aspect you can think of between C2A, culture, technology, product, anything related to product market fit. Almost 250 companies are applying each batch, 10 are selected, 3 months overall, with a very unique approach to any company, from business to technology to foundership, etc., with a lot of help by Intel. It's running today in Tel Aviv, in parallel in Munich, and about to be open in 2022 in London and probably New York or Boston, and reporting directly to the number 2 at Intel, the CTO. MVP is probably the most, or one of the most important thing in the early stage of a startup. Sometimes it's something you cannot validate in the due diligence with the VC who will support you, but only very short conviction. But actually building an MVP and what will be the MVP and what will be the use case of MVP, it's a constant struggle, and I'm sure the team here with their experience and background will help support it. So again, welcome, apply, batch number 6. Maya is your address, and happy to host you here. Have a great event.
So, hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Karina Rubinstein. I'm a business development manager in the Israel Innovation Authority. For those of you who are not familiar with the Innovation Authority, we are the government agency which supports innovation in Israel and practically promoting the industry and the economy of Israel through that. Thank you, hosts and so on. I'm happy to be here. I wanted to share with you a new program that we opened this in the beginning of this year, and actually applies to the stage that you are right now or will be shortly when you're gonna raise your seed round. So this is a new program that actually applies to startups that are raising seed round. The Innovation Authority is matching to venture capital, Entrée, or other ones that you have in mind. 40% from our side up to a level of 3.5 million shekels. Very short timelines of tests from our side. Practically, we are doing the same due diligence as your venture capital. Short timelines, very short application, and no hustle, no budget, no nothing. We give the money, practically. We give you the money as your venture capital or other investor will give you the money. The same goes here. We would like to see very much startups that coming from domains of DeepTech that are struggling in raising money, and we would like very much to help there. See more new companies from our side. It can be a company with very limited staff at the beginning, or not at all, only brand new. Practically, we will support whatever stage you are and the milestone you are heading to at the end of the term. So I urge you to come and talk with me about it. It's a fabulous opportunity. Entrée has been with us already with a few companies. They're planning to submit more. This is a grand opportunity. Don't miss out. We would like to hand out money, and this is the opportunity for you. So I wish you all very good success. And for those of you graduating or applying to Ignite, please come talk to me, afterwards. So have a great event. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Faye, and you guys might have all seen my name on all of the countless emails that you've gotten and in the invitations. I am from Entree Capital. I'm the head of marketing and communications here. I'll give you a quick overview of Entree Capital for those of you that do not know us or may have gotten the invite to this event through our incredible partners, Intel Ignite and Innovation Authority. So thank you so much for our fantastic partners. Entree Capital founded in 2010. Now we have been investing pre-seed, seed, early stage companies, early growth as well, for the past decade already. And as you guys go out, there'll be a little bit of a book. You can kind of see a little bit more about what Entree Capital does. And specifically, the reason for this event is we've been also, throughout that time, been investing in DeepTech as the reason you guys are all here. Whether that be, from the software level, as we have when it comes to Classiq, one of our portfolio companies, the hardware level when it comes to Vortex imaging, even down to the molecular level when it comes to something like 11 Therapeutics or Omnix Medical. We've kind of been there through all of those stages, both through portfolio support, through helping with the ideation, all the way through really actually practically helping our founders get the things done. And one of the great things about Entree is that we're a generalist fund, meaning that we're able to connect all of the different elements. We're not just working within the deep tech space, we're also working within regular SaaS spaces, within the health industry, within many diverse markets and sectors. So one of the fantastic things that we'll be able to offer, and who here is from Entree real quick? If anyone, all our team members, raise your hand here. So look around, find someone. If Ron is in the middle of a conversation afterwards, there's many other people from our team that you can sit and speak to. And I just want to thank everyone for coming here to the event, and we're gonna be kicking it off with our moderator here. So thank you. Just make sure you turn your phones on silent, and thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you, Faye. So my name is Yuval, I'm the CTO of Intel Ignite. My quick background is from the semiconductors. I was running deep tech projects from most of my life, and this subject that we're gonna discuss today is thrilling to me. I was always amazed by the number of deep tech startups and initiatives that are running in Israel, and I always thought that every deep tech vertical is different. Working in Intel Ignite and working with some deep tech startups, we see a lot of similarities, and I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. We have a very varied panel here, from software to hardware, from first-time entrepreneurs to serials, the funding side, so I'm really looking forward to that. And our subject today is deep tech. We're going to discuss a little bit what is deep tech, try to define even what it is, and then discuss what is it to be a startup in the deep tech domain, what is it to be a startup in the early stages in deep tech, and eventually what is the minimum viable product for this kind of startups. So really looking forward for that discussion. Let's start maybe with a short introduction of our panel. Maybe you want to start?
Hi, Minerbi, CEO at Classiq. In short, we develop software for quantum computers. A team of 30 quantum software engineers based in Tel Aviv, obviously. Background, so I'm an alumnus of the Talpiot program, served for a decade in the intelligence community, and that's enough for now, I think.
Hello, my name is Tomer Ben David. I graduated from the Technion, computer science, and then I have an MBA from Tel Aviv University. I grew up in the semiconductor industry, working for Intel, Mellanox, and some other companies doing software and architecture. In 2009, I co-founded, along with Uri Tal, our first startup. The name was Rocket Technologies. We developed a simulator acceleration co-engine for chip design. We got eventually NVIDIA and Entrée Capital were among the investors. We got acquired in 2016 by Cadence. We worked there for another 3.5 years, and we started Vortex, and I'm gonna leave it a little bit for later, but in a nutshell, we're doing a medical imaging device, handheld, pretty cool.
Hi, my name is Leah, and I'm CTO and co-founder of Converge. Converge is a data science platform to help data science teams to bring data science to production much faster and easier. We are based in Jerusalem, so it's not obvious in Tel Aviv, sorry. And we got acquired by Intel a year ago.
Achituv from Entree, you heard enough about us.
Cool. So, I don't need that. So let's start maybe with setting the stage and do some definition. We have a lot of technological folks here, so let's start with definition. What is a deep tech? Let's try to better define what is deep tech. each one of you. And by the way, I encourage the crowd here just in an Israeli way, you know, if you have any questions, just raise your hand. Make sure that the question is relevant to most of the crowd here, and let's have a conversation.
Right, so the obvious answer, sorry for obvious second, would be it's something scientific, very technical, but as a CEO, DeepTech for me is a narrative. It's an excuse sometimes. What's your ARR? What the hell is ARR? We are DeepTech, right? We are, you know, it's you play in another court. You're going to be market leader, and there isn't really market today, but it's going to be huge. So obviously, you know, it's a mean to gain what you need, one of many. So that's what DeepTech is for me.
I wouldn't define DeepTech in what I'm going to say, but I want to emphasize some gut feeling that I have around that topic, and that is, I mean, a lot of companies do a lot of technology, but I don't think all of them can be considered as DeepTech. And one test that I would put there is if you throw more resources, more people, more money at the problem, with the problem really, will you solve it much, much faster? And I think for DeepTech kind of technologies, they're kind of agnostic. I wouldn't say fully agnostic, but they tolerate adding more resources. And that serves as a great opportunity for startups in particular, because I mean, you can imagine that the large companies competing with you, they can throw a lot more money, but they don't have the time and the ambitious and what you can bring to the table. So that is why I think startups tend to go for the deep tech when they do, and I think it makes sense, in particular for the Israeli industry. We can get to that maybe later some more.
I think for me, deep tech is more taking engineering and bringing it to the next level. And I think it's harder to scale that way. It's like you said, I think it's you need more money and you have a lot of stress from the investors and from everyone, and you need to motivate everyone all the time. It's a bit harder to be in the market of deep tech for me.
Got it. And what is bringing it to the next level? If you can elaborate a little bit, you know, taking engineering to the next level.
I think making a change in engineering and innovation, thinking out of the box. Not always it's bring something for the masses. Sometimes it's for like a specific market, specific customers, and it means that you need to work with the customers all the time. You need to be obsessed about your competitors. You will see a lot of giants around you that are trying to do the same thing. Then they have more money, they have more people to invest, but you have the leverage of being small and can innovate faster, and you can do better stuff in shorter time. So I think this is innovation.
So our definition of deep tech is the following. It's something that most probably no one knows how to do, including not the team in front of you. But everybody would like to solve the problem that it would solve if it can be done, and that's when we invest. I mean, you know, when the problem is big enough and the solution is different enough to a point where it radically solves the problem in a way that's not clear that it can be solved, right?
No comment. Of course it can be solved. What do you mean?
Cool. So I think we're hearing a lot of uncertainty here in the solution, and it lies in the technological space, you know, on top of all the business space that is usually coming with the startup initiative. I think it will be intriguing to understand also the differences between, you know, quantum hardware/imaging and software, and where, you know, deep tech lies in each of those domains. Great. So thank you. Let's jump directly to the business and discuss MVP, minimum viable product. This, you know, tricky thing. Let's try to share some of your experience for what is an MVP for you on your domain, and how did you get, and if you can share also some of the mistakes that you've done in the way of defining it, that would be great. So who want to start?
So, you know, minimal, it depends to who, right? To an investor. So let's take what we do, right? So we develop software for quantum computers. It's very easy to develop software for small quantum computers, for 5 qubits. It's very challenging to develop software for 50 qubits, and it's impossible to do it for 1,000 qubits, right? So And basically, I'm simplifying, that's what we do, right? So as an MVP for investor, I can show that, right, I can very easily do that for 5 qubits. Most of them doesn't really, they don't really know what's the difference. So that's enough, maybe that's enough. MVP for us would be, can we really scale, right? Is it possible? Maybe we take some small example and we make sure we understand how we go forward, but it's small. But an MVP for a customer, it's much higher, right? If I want to be working with the JP Morgan's quantum team, right? They really don't care that I can do that for 50 qubits, right? They can do that as well. They want to make sure that the product is there, it's mature enough, it's interesting enough, and obviously that's very different. So maybe a mistake that could be done, and we'll talk about design partners later, so I'm not sure if it was a mistake, was to start too high, right? We started with one of the largest banks, and our MVP was very nice. It wasn't pathetic, but for them it was, okay, guys, what the hell do you want us to do with that, right? So, and we'll discuss it later, but again, you really need to dedicate the MVP for your audience, and this is probably the best way to go.
So talking about MVP with regards to Vortex, I can't do that just now because we're still in an earlier stage, proving that the technology works. But I can turn to my previous life, and that's in Rocket. And I wouldn't say that we have a very good experience on the MVP concept, but we weren't smart, we were just lucky. And the story was that we started off implementing a simulation accelerator using GPUs, and we were so excited. We talked with a bunch of customers, potential customers, and they each told us what they want, and we gathered this huge list, and then we started implementing whatever we thought is right. But that's where the stupid part came, and the lucky turned in, and we somehow bumped by coincidence into NVIDIA. That was, we can talk about maybe partners later, but the idea was that they really helped us focus, and the MVP is extremely important in the sense that it's not just the talks. You need to bring something that is very accurate and tuned. It can miss a lot of points, but it needs to be tuned to some customer that is willing to pay for it. And one thing that I know I failed on, and I could potentially fail again, you would say, okay, that's too specific. You're missing out on many others. But that's some of the risk you're gonna take there. I mean, even if you hit only, maybe I'm totally wrong, and then we can start an argument and some fights and whatever. But in my philosophy, even if you hit a 20% portion of the industry, it's gonna build you on the right path. I mean, you're building muscle. You're on the right path. And once you are able to sell to somebody, then you can scale, as opposed to just to make sure that we're all on the same page, as opposed to trying to figure out everything. So that's my 2 cents or 50 cents on this topic.
So for us, the MVP was, we were part of a field that we needed to educate the market that they needed a science platform. Now everyone's saying MLOps, but 3 years ago nobody was saying MLOps, and we went to customers and needed to convince them that this is a platform that they needed. And I think MVP for us was, maybe it is still a struggle, that you need to reinvent yourself every 6 months because the market is rapidly changing, and you need to be on top of the market all the time and see how competitors are operating and what your customers need. So for us, we worked very, very closely with customers that understood the pain, that felt the pain. That was the most important thing for us, not only to find people that are willing to pay for our product, but willing to use the product day to day, willing to work with us and help us understand what, or tune in the product for their needs. And then from those kinds of customers, we were able to scale to different kind of customers and prove that it doesn't work only for a segment of the market, but it works for many segments. And I think the best lesson or the best advice that I can give is, don't be afraid of bugs. And MVP has bugs, and that's okay. And as long as you have good relationship with the first customers that you have, the first 10, 20 customers that you have, they will forgive you if you give them value. And that's the most important thing you need to understand. You need to give the customers value. It's not only to sign somebody and have the logo, it's to work with them and get a constant feedback so you can grow, you can scale, and you can take your product to the next level. So that was for us.
First of all, there's no generic answer. It's very context sensitive. I'll take 2 examples here and then I'll give another one. So from our perspective, an MVP is not the goal. It's a means to an end, which is taking the company to the next stage, including funding, obviously. Specifically, in Nir's case, product was not part of the OKRs of the first funding and second funding phase. It was the best team in the world in quantum, right? That's what we did. No, but I'm just, out of the 50 people in the world, at least higher, 50% of them. Best brand, because there's nothing to deliver because there's no quantum computer to use it with, so it's not the first thing to do. And then the best product, right? But it's not the first product that's the most important thing. So the MVP was team and brand, although it's DeepTech. That's the phase of the market. In other cases, one that was part of Intel Ignite, Light Solver, and in Vortex case, they don't need to speak with customers, don't waste their time on it. If it's going to work, they just need a fax machine, they'll get the orders. I mean, seriously, spending time with customers to solve the traveling salesperson problem, if you solve it 10 in the, 10 with 17 zeros faster than anyone else, you don't need to persuade anyone. You need to focus on what's important, and that's making sure the promise you made, first of all, to yourself as a founder, and then to your partners, the investors, is really going to work, right? I believe you, it's going to work, but we don't know how, right? So it's very context sensitive. I gave the Classiq as example because it's the opposite of product first, because of the phase in the market.
Great. So I think again we're hearing here that the balance between listening to a customer and just go and do the technology, and then everything else will fall into place. I guess it depends on the vertical, and then there is no easy answer here. From your experience, before we go in, the next subject that we're going to discuss is design partners, which is entangled to the discussion that we just had. But just before that, if you can share some of your experience about this, this dilemma, and Nir, you started with that. So listening to your customers, maybe learning from them, from your experience, versus just go and do your thing and then go out when it's good and shiny. If you have some more experience to share on that.
Yes, you can't listen too much to customers because definitely not in our space, because currently quantum computers are shitty, right? You can play with qubits, I should say, are quantum bits with 15 qubits you can run or your own laptop. On the most powerful supercomputer in the world, you can simulate 40 qubits, and it chokes in 41, right? And every qubit you add, so you need to double the computational power, so you understand where it goes. So today we have machines for a few dozen qubits, and what these quantum teams are doing is optimizing for 9, for 11, for 12 qubits, and that's great. But if we listen to what they want, we would end up with optimizing small quantum computers, and in 2 years when we're going to have 1,000 qubits, we won't be market leaders. So you need to understand what they want in order to get what you need for them, and we'll discuss what we need for them later, but not too much, at least in our field.
I think one thing that happens when you're going and trying to define your MVP is that you're getting all this, it's a huge list of requests, either from one potential customer, and obviously if you're doing a superposition of all the potential customers. And then how do you normalize that list? How do you balance it? How do you give weights to all of these things? And I'll give you a tip that I found very useful, which is even cool. And that is a particular potential customer would say, I want this, and we'll sit with you in a room and give you, I don't know, 15 requirements, 30, okay? So you go and you do and you implement. Some of them are way too hard, some of them you just don't want to do, and some of them you don't know how to do. So implement part of the list. So now you can do either continue working on the list, because, okay, that's what he said. Okay, Intel wants to be defined, right? Or you just do the set that you believe that are right for you, and then you come back. And it's a little bit rude, but you come back and say, hey, is this good? And what you find that obviously you haven't exceeded or met all the requirements you got, but sometimes if the customer is reasonable and he really wants the product, he would follow along and drop things off the list. If they're just persistent and they don't, perhaps either they don't really want it or they're not the right partner for you, they'll continue asking a lot of things. So that's a nice way to start to filter stuff.
A good indication for what MVP is, because the list items that are not that critical, probably they're not a part
They
of
need
MVP.
to be there, yeah.
And you need to sense which are the ones that are really making the difference for your customer.
Yeah, and if they don't drop any, then they're not the right partner for you.
Yeah, how is that in your
So I think for us, it's mostly not to work with one customer, but to work with many customers in the beginning, maybe 10 or 15 customers, and then see if their requests match. So if the requests match, you know that there is a sense to build those kind of features. But if everybody are asking different features, different requests, different bugs, it means that you didn't get to the point that you're in a product market fit. And you need to go back and understand what you need to do in order to achieve that. And this is very, very important. And I agree with you regarding the list. I don't think you need to rush and do everything that the customer in the beginning asks you. But again, for us, not talking to customers or potential customers would be not going anywhere. We saw a lot of competitors, especially in Israel, that started in the same phase that we did, and they didn't talk to customers. They thought they know better than everyone, and they failed eventually. So I think it depends on the market, obviously, but for us it was really, really crucial because we were in a part of educating the field again, and it was very important for us to be able to do that and scale with those customers. I do think that if you're in a deep tech area, it's also important to understand who are the customers in terms of the logo. So if I go and say, hey, this customer is using our product, it should mean something to other people. It shouldn't be a small, very, very small team that nobody understands and care. Maybe it will help you specifically, but it helps when people can recommend. And eventually, if you go to one of your first customer is a big company, an enterprise, if they know people that work in different companies and they heard about you from them and they can reach out without you to those companies that are using your product, this would be beneficial for you. So I think it's very, very crucial.
Cool. And Ran, maybe I'll ask it differently, because Tomer had a hint that MVP is something that is worth money for someone, for your customer, right? And I think a lot of your companies that are deep tech, and maybe take Quantum aside for a sec, are dealing with the innovation part of the customers. So how do you see the difference between working with innovation for validation and working with a real R&D of a customer, and what is your kind of tip for the founders working with innovation parts?
So I think that the innovation parts are a must gate, but it's just a gate. No offense to anyone, I ran some of these myself, so I can say whatever I want, with no offense. It's always to make sure that you have the right champions within the organization. I'll give you an example on one of our companies, Magnus Metal. It's in heavy industry, super risky business, metal production, and we went for the top companies, which are, by the way, top of the Fortune 100 companies as well, together. So we're talking about Ford and Caterpillar and ABB and AGCO and the big players. And it took us 2 years to get from the innovation guys to the business guys. And you need to choose right. If the people in the innovation side have the political clout required within the organization and they're not a side business that no one cares about, they might be able to bring you in front of the decision makers when you're ready, and you need to be ready. No, you need the internal people. Yeah, this is why you need to do at least 5 or 6 and not 1. Bet all the bets in the same basket is not a good thing. In addition, from my experience, the first customer you work with is always wrong. Always. Maybe I didn't do it enough, but after 50 times, I think the first one is always wrong. So don't bet on the direction from the first one.
Cool. All right, so let's move ahead and talk about design partners. Oh, sorry.
Hi. So I actually have a question because most of you are from the software side of DeepTech, and we especially using embedded systems. So we don't have the ability financially to actually supporting MVP for multiple customers because you need to actually purchase the hardware and produce the boards and stuff in addition to the software. So how exactly you would navigate in such area?
Okay, I'll try. Although we are a software company with the hardware on the side, I would say that you need to validate and work without the actual platform, just in theory, with a lot of guys, and then take some to the final. I mean, just filter them. I mean, an easy game would be to just imagine you sit with your champion there. Okay, imagine that you have this and that. What would you do with that? What do you need for that? It will always tell you, and that's something I experienced. Okay, but it's not there. Okay, so we can leave the room and forget it. But no, let's take a minute. Okay, assume you would have that. What would you do with it? What do you need? What's your gap? What will it solve for you? And you can do this all in theory without throwing the hardware at him, and then filter those that you do want to spend the hardware for. That's it. I don't have any.
Since I assume if you'll get money, you can get it done, then I'm going to answer. Okay. So, first of all, you can look at the program 46 because the problem is that I assume you're not getting enough money from investors given the stage you're at in order to get what you need to get done. That's why there's program 46. So talk with Karina later. That's item number 1. Secondly, there's no generic answer to your question. I don't know what you're doing. I mean, okay, so it's very, very specific. If it's doing something in medical, one thing. If it's doing,
it's more into medical, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's fitness to medical. It's something in the middle.
Let's talk about it later. But there's no generic answer except being able to fund it, which is.
I know. We all know.
Cool, and we'll talk about funding a little bit later. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
The question is for Ron. You defined an MVP as something that takes the company to the next stage. Is there a number beyond which you think is unreasonable to try and fund in Israel? Like say, if your MVP costs $10 million, are you still going to be, is it reasonable to try and fund it in Israel, or you should cut it to $5 million, or you should cut it to $3 million, whatever it takes, because you're not going to be able to raise that money?
That's the next fundamental milestone. $10 million.
It depends on how quickly will the revenue run once you cross the milestone. I'll explain. If you're building something that it's clear that it's gonna do 10 times the revenue of the first year, let's say from $500,000 to $5 million, then 50 million and 500 million, everybody would fund it. If it's in a very, very tough market where the process of getting revenue, which is the only thing that's important eventually, right? That's the target. Happy customers paying you money, right? Then it really depends on the type of business. If it's a slow medical type thing, then we're investing in those from molecules to medical devices and software, right? Don't get me wrong, but a seed with high risk of $10 million, you need to be a second timer to get that, even today. As opposed to if you go to something that everybody thinks is going to fly and you're just out of 80-200 and getting 10 million because you're doing something that starts with a C, right? So it really depends, right? No, so that's why I'm saying it's hard in DeepTech to get $10 million out of the gate because it's usually hard to explain why you need so much money in order to prove that it can even work. Maybe it's still in university. We've invested in a startup. We're doing now a $100 million round. It's the first round of the company. But the previous $30 million have been invested in the in Weizmann Institute. You understand what I'm meaning? If you need so much money to prove that it works, maybe it's an academia issue, not an industrial thing.
5 million is probably
I don't.
on top of it. Or if your problem is good enough, then you should get.
You know, depending on the dilution I'm getting, it's.
Okay, you're off the.
I can't answer very generic questions on that. 10 million is
It's a good idea.
you need second timers that have done that sold the company for a couple of hundred millions, that you can really trust as an investor. And if it's a critical question of viability or feasibility, I'm not sure why $10 million is really required. So let's talk about it later.
But you know what I wanted to add to that? Just, I think there is a confusion between POC and an MVP. It's not the same, okay? So initial POC could be an investment in the academia stage, an academic stage. An MVP is a different stage.
So, can I? Quick question. So, is it correct to say that with DeepTech, the biggest risk, a bigger portion of the risk is whether the team can make it or whether it can be done, whereas in just a software company, the biggest risk is can you sell it to the market against the competition and so forth? I mean, it's a pendulum. It's not a one binary answer. But is it true that there is more emphasis as into can it be done? Will it?
Yeah.
So maybe that's also part of the
Yeah. You were late. That's what I said in the beginning. We're friends. That's.
Not anymore. Will we spend more?
Cool. So we'll have another question, and then we're gonna go on with the.
My question is for Neil, for his offhand remark about building an MVP for a customer that's too big. Do you think what you should have done, what Classiq should have done, was try to solve maybe a small problem for that customer and then scale inside while you build your product? Or do you think you should have started with smaller customers and tried to create a holistic solution that will later scale up to the bigger customers?
Good question. So the smallest customers in our field right now is Fortune 200 companies, so they aren't so small. My answer is that I needed this customer for a very specific reason, and that was raising my Series A. And we did that, so it was sacrificed and it was okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue to our next. Yep.
Not overplan.
Look for the next milestone.
Yeah, when you're Fortune 200, that's a little bit different. So that's a good segue for our next topic, which is market validation. How do you get market validation? We already started to discuss that. So market validation for you with Fortune 200 is, I wouldn't say easy, but straightforward in the sense of how do you get it. But if you can elaborate, and then we'll go and discuss also, products that are dealing with more customers, maybe smaller ones, which might be different. So if you can share a little bit about the market validation, how did you go along, what are the pitfalls?
Right. So again, it depends on the stage. So first, when you're going to raise the seed round, so market validation could be a LinkedIn correspondence with a quantum software engineers at Goldman or at ExxonMobil, and then having them on a 30-minute Zoom call and making them tell that your problem is important and it could be relevant at some stage. So good. But after that, obviously, it gets more complex because this is a market education by definition. You're everything is in this market because it's emerging and it's changing on a daily basis. It's a market education. So the validation here is first be sure that you solve something relevant, right? And here, to be honest, we didn't really need the market for that because it's kind of obvious, but we did need the market to adapt our product to some extent in different stages. Obviously, right now, we sell it to companies and we are scaling, so we had some shift over time, But at first, and I'll describe it when we get to design partners, it was more letting them solve a small problem that is of interest to them with our platform, even though it's very, very small. And so, yeah.
So for what is market validation, I think I'll start by saying, what is it not? Okay. And as an entrepreneur, I remember, and I do that all the time, wrongly, you have this idea of your product and you're so proud of it and you're happy. So you would go to potential customers in the future and you would ask them, if you would have this and that and that and that and that, would that help you? And they, oh yeah, it's great. Sometimes they would say, it's amazing, and then you will call your friends, right? And those that you get some negative feedback or you're not able to wake them up, and you'll say, okay, I just need to ask some more people. So that's the wrong way to go about it. And the right market validation is you keep your cards close to your chest and you know what your solution is and what you're gonna ask those potential customers, okay, what do you need? What's your pain? Forget who I am, forget what we do. And by the way, we do this today. We go to radiologists. We don't say, okay, if you have this amazing device, blah, blah, blah. They'll say, yeah, just get out of here. I want it some other day. Because it's cool, but they don't have it here. You go and you ask them, okay, what's missing in your flow? What makes your life miserable? When do your patients die? And then you're like, it's funny. That's what I have in my cards, right? So that's how I would go about that.
For us, market validation was to go and find different kind of teams to work with. We had startups that we wanted to work with because startups scale fast and they move faster than what the other companies usually move. And then you can test different features, different areas of your product with different kind of startups. One of our first customers was BMW because we wanted to prove that enterprise wants this kind of product and this can scale. So we had to work with different kind of companies, different kind of teams. Sometimes it was one data science, sometimes it was 100 of data scientists. We wanted to know that our product fits every kind of team before we scale, so we know that we can do that. We can take the money and scale with it. And this was the market validation. And I think one another advice that I can get is that learn from the no's. If somebody says no to you, even if it's an investor, you need to understand why specifically they don't think your product is good. Maybe it's a small change. Maybe it's how you tell the story. Maybe you tell it wrong. And you need to learn from that. And this helps us tremendously to understand that we need to listen to everyone, especially to the no's.
And would you recommend to focus on, if, for example, you mentioned both startups and enterprises, when your product can, scale or be relevant for both, what's your recommendation? Going and, proving some MVP, viability into one segment, or just try and see what sticks?
So I think the first thing is to find the champion, like we mentioned here, and it's different champion for different companies. Sometimes it's the IT that would have the money and the budget, and sometimes it's the data science, and sometimes it's the R&D, and you don't know that. And that's part of finding your MVP, because you need to understand that every company has a different champion. Every company brings the budget from a different place. It's not constant. So for us, it was just first was to find the champion and then to understand from where the budget. Sometimes the champion is not the same way the budget comes from. And that's annoying because you need to do the same thing for different people in the organization. But this is okay. You need to learn from it. You need to understand that different champions have different pitches. It's not one pitch that works for every kind of company, every kind of team. Startups, usually the CTO or the CEO would be involved in this kind of resolution to put money on your product. And in enterprises, it would be as a team lead or somebody like that. So for us, it was to test the champion, test different teams, different segments in the enterprise. This helped us tremendously.
And Ron, where do you feel that your company has a market validation? What is this time point?
So you need to optimize for speed. Eventually, we discussed it on the amount of money. Product never rests. Even when we had around us 12,000 developers, we had more features than developers to do, right? It never ends. So don't look for the product that's needed. It's you never reach it. So if you're looking for speed, you're looking for the common denominator that provides you with a repeatable cookie cutter type of thing that you find a buyer, You find the use case that your technology can do. I'll give you an example. Obviously, after you pass the phase, would it work? So what Tomer is doing Star Trek's sick bay scanner. You know, when there's someone sick, they're doing like this with a phone, and they see CT and MRI and everything of the guy. That's what he's trying to build. He promised me it would work. I believe him. But even if it would work, and it would work, right? The question is, who do we sell it to first, and on what use case? Because you can't sell everything to everyone in parallel. You know, you'll sell nothing to anyone. So we'll need to find the repeatable business that the pain is big enough in order for us to cookie cutter sell it as fast as we can, so that we can finance the next 20 years of features that we need to develop and be a significant company. So cookie cutter, speed, common denominator, that's what I would look for. Pain and buyer, obviously.
Cool. 10 minutes? Cool. And then Q&A. Was just about... Okay, 5 minutes.
It's 11:20 now.
Cool. So I think we touched a lot of the items, and we touched funding a little bit, and we'll go into that in 2 minutes. But let's discuss design partnerships. Okay, we promised that. So I think it's very important. If you can touch a little bit of your experience with POCs, what is a good POCs? How do you handle design partnerships when you don't have actually, you know, a product or a market yet in deep tech, which is sometimes the case.
We're short on time, so I'll just give a small anecdote or a tip. Choosing sometimes you would have these few options to select a design partner if you're lucky, right? And some of them may ask for they look to you about the same, okay, the same kind of value they can bring. I would now take it to be able to select. I will just try to see that potential partner has the ability to eventually pay. And how do you do that? It's like running some water through the pipes. You need to see that if you open the tap, even a small drip of money, it's an evidence that this is a potential customer. If you can't get anything out of that partner, then that's a red flag. That's a red flag, and that's my tip.
So I kind of said it before, but for me, by definition, a design partner would be the minimal customer engagement that will bring me to the next funding round. And what should be understood that it's very vague. What's design partnerships? Many of the enterprises you'll talk with don't really know what it is. So I don't know. It could be a 80 pages signed contract, or it could be some email correspondence. It should be what's of interest to you, right? If you need some real feedback, so do that. If you need funding, so find, you know, what your Series A or B investor needs in order to have his or her validation, right? So this is my 2 cents.
For us, design partner was a bit different experience. We wanted the validation from the bigger enterprises in the market, and we went to NVIDIA to try to convince them that we are the best platform out there. And we found specific people that were very, very excited about our platform and then could sell it in NVIDIA. So the leaders in NVIDIA knew our name, knew who we are, and then they could introduce us to their sales team. They could introduce us to their partners. So it opened up a door of opportunities for us. It's also very good in the marketing field and the PR. You can go to customer and say, hey, NVIDIA said we are the best platform. We have this badge, and this sounds much better, and people believe you faster. After NVIDIA, we were able to go to the other giant and speak to them, and it was very easy to do that. So now we have Dell, we have Intel, we have NVIDIA, we have everyone. So it means it's worth something. So for us, it was more of a marketing point of view or opening doors for us, and not very much for selling.
Cool. So we'll open it up in quick to questions in 2 minutes, but let's touch a little bit the funding perspective, and we discussed it already. So Ran, you already touched the the significance of being maybe a second time for the funding. If you can share a little bit of your perspective of funding in deep tech, and how do you look at investment?
First of all, I want to correct. You don't need to be a second time in order to open a big company. To raise $10 million on technology risk, that's a separate issue. So I think the first thing we're looking for is founder market fit. especially when you're talking about the technology risk, the people need to be relevant in how to solve it. And the problem that it would solve is obvious, and then I don't care about any other risk, right? You know, the practical next thing is to be able to find the right steps in the circus of funding, to be able to get enough funding and enough money without too much dilution. And again, Program 46 helps here, because if there's a great idea and you need $1.5 million and you give 40%, you kill the company out of the gate. Because if it's gone and in the dust, it doesn't matter. But if it works, you're stuck with over dilution. So that's a problem. Don't do that. No, they're not. That's what I'm saying. It's one of the solutions to that problem, that we don't take risk on one hand, and we get the percentages we think are the maximal that are relevant to keep the company well funded in the next rounds before you get to 0.2% for the founder, before the pro rata and the things in the exit and the legal language. So I think that's the most critical thing, just finding the right steps and funding it right.
Cool. So we wanted to hear also the funding aspect from the founders, but I think we have 5 more minutes. So
how many questions do we have here? That's a question. Raise your hand if you have a question.
Oh yeah. Let's go to
questions.
questions.
We're jumping into questions. If you can also ask your question pretty loud, because we do want those that will watch us afterwards to hear your question and the answer as well. So when you ask it, ask it loud.
Yeah, I would ask maybe regarding to the market validation process. How did you learn from the feedback you got from the customers, from the people that you learned from, and how it affects your product? Did you change? Did you pivot? Maybe you can share from your experience.
Wants to take that.
Right, so first it affected very much, right? The first feedback from our design partner, so this is the beginning of the demo we show until today, and it was very helpful, and we couldn't have done that otherwise probably. It's tempting to do exactly what you're told to, right? So if you work with BASF, so they are very interested in some specific molecule simulation, and then you can spend a lot of time about a specific use case but forget the holistic product. So you need to manage this balance, but yes, obviously customer feedback is important.
Related to the question, can you give an example about, eventually MVP is a process, it's not an event. So can you give an example, how do you measure your progress to the MVP? Because eventually it's not about gut feeling, I assume. It's a lot about gut, but you need to make sure that you are on the right direction. So how did you measure your progress to the MVP?
You have a good answer for that?
Again, I think
you're a data company, so
yeah, just keep talking with the customers. I think regarding your question as well, like you need to learn the feedback, but you need also to be to suspect about what's the intentions of the customer. So maybe it's not something that you really need to do, and you really need to understand if the feedback helped you or didn't help you. Not necessarily you need to go and run and go to the engineers and say, yeah, do that. For us was to talk to the customer all the time throughout building the MVP and making sure that once it's ready, they will work with it. Even if we have bugs, even if it's not like the perfect product, but if it brings them value, this is the most important thing in the MVP for us. And that's what we wanted to see. So we gave products in alpha stages, in beta stages, long before we were able to sell it to bigger customers, because we wanted to get this kind of gut feeling from the customers and not only from within ourselves. Another point of view for us was that we were data scientists. We needed the product. So we use the product while developing it, doing outsource projects for different companies. And then when we saw it helped us, we knew it was meaningful and could be meaningful for others. So that helped us and to understand that.
you measure the distance between the speed parameter I talked and your current feature set. You need to have enough in order to sell 10 a month or 10 a day or whatever the number is. Okay.
Two last questions, maybe someone from the back, or because we had a lot of questions. Yes, please.
It's a question, I guess, for Tomer and for Ran. What if you're building a deep tech product that the market that you're shooting, you know that it's going to solve a problem, but they're very not technological. We're a construction tech company. It's very hard to educate them. They don't like technology. I guess it relates to your thing, because how you're going to convince people to use the scanner that you guys are building. How, I guess, do you do the product marketing? How do you teach people, hey, listen, this is something great. I know you don't understand it, but it's going to change the way you work. So.
Talk to Eran in the back. Eran. See him? He has two. He has two construction tech companies which are flying, so he'll give you a great answer on that. There's no market that's not ripe for disruption. One of the ways I did a round A in my Magnus Metal company is I brought a letter from ABB saying that that's the first innovation in 4,000 years. That's when they built houses with mud, right? So you have a better industry.
I'll just go back to my previous tip, and that is just don't argue that, and you don't need to oversell it. Just know their pain and tell them, okay, I'm going to solve this problem for you. You don't need to convince them that the technology is that or that. Just, you have a problem, I'm on it. And that's my, I'm saying it.
I want to add something. Another important thing, specifically in construction tech, it's, I think, solved, but as a generic answer, you need to check before you enter a domain that there's funding that's coming to it. I mean, if you look at the trend of the funding and you see that in the past 5 years it went from $1 billion a year to 200 million a year, don't start. If it's the other way around, you'll find it if you're good. I don't know you, but don't go against the trend on funding.
Do we have time for another question? Last one?
We could do one last question.
All right, there on the back.
Hi, question for Ran. I'm here today looking for a DeepTech CTO, a DeepTech product guy. I'm just curious, of the three of you on stage from your companies, how many of your leaders of your companies are actually from DeepTech?
You mean how many from our team is from DeepTech?
Whether the CEO is coming from a DeepTech background or not necessarily.
Yes, I think it's, okay, in my philosophy it is essential. You can't do it otherwise. I mean, that's the stage of the company. Maybe in a few years from now, I'll be kicked off and they'll bring some suit guy. But for now, I'm the guy.
Yeah, so not all of us are 17 years old. Our CTO is a world-leading expert in quantum computing, and no one would look at us otherwise, and for very good reasons. This deep tech experience is very important. After that, you can bring many people who are not, the most experienced people, and you teach them, but you need to start from somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think the question is on the risk of putting someone that's not going to be the right CEO for the company, right? That's the question. So it's a risk we're willing to take depending on the case. Eventually, there's a certain point in a company's life where passion is 1,000 times more important than execution on the business side, especially in deep tech. That, if you get the product right and the technology right, and there's a lot of customers, you want someone with execution capacity on scaling the business, right? That could be a CRO or something like that. And sometimes you replace the CEO with a non-founder. But definitely when as you get closer to the wall, it just looks higher, and that's the stages we're talking about here, right? You get closer to the detail, it just seems more and more complex, not less and less complex. Because you understand the problems ahead of you. Passion is number one by far, and the personality traits of the founders of not finding a window, going around, jumping, blowing it up or whatever. That's what's needed, and therefore, in my eye, and it's not the same thing between all our partners, right? we think differently on things. But me personally, get past the wall, then we'll talk. But it's not the common answer. So.
Cool. All right. So we're past time. Hope it was intriguing for you as it was for me. Thank you very much for our panelists. Thank you guys for coming in. It's really amazing to see all this crowd. And let's take the next questions offline here. We have a few more minutes to network.
I want to just remind everyone that Karina is here to answer any questions that you may have about the Israel Innovation Authority. We have Ron that will stay around and mingle and answer some of your questions, as well as Yuval and everyone else from the Intel Ignite team. Thank you to Intel Ignite and to Israel Innovation.